Hello and welcome to this special mini podcast of the Internet of Things Made Simple. I'm Larry Bushhumer. I apologize for not putting out a full podcast on my usual Thursday. However, I was running up against some time crunches with Christmas and I didn't want to miss this time slot. So I decided to put this mini episode in its place. And based on the timeliness of the topic, I don't think you'll be that disappointed. In mini episode number 4, we're going to tell you why you should not buy a 5G phone in 2019, and in fact, why it's a very bad idea. The brief history, and if you go back a little bit, say 10 or 15 years, smartphones never really relied on speed. The networks they ran on were quite slow. The first BlackBerry devices didn't even run on the cellular network. They ran on some data-only networks, and that meant that it could take up to 15, 20, 40 seconds for even a basic message to transmit the network. You didn't notice it because it was happening behind the scenes, but it really wasn't a speedster. When iPhone came out, a lot of people seem to remember that there was some great experiences on it, but it was on a 2G network. That very much limited what you could do. It was for photos and maybe whatever social media was out then. It was definitely not for any kind of high-speed traffic like video. 3G started to change that a little bit. You started to be able to do some video. There might have been some buffering around, but at least it was usable. And when that started, our lives have never been the same since. When 4G hit, the amount of content being consumed over the cellular networks just went ballistic. According to Statista, hope I said that right, thanks for these numbers, the average data use has climbed from under 2 gigabytes to over 4 gigabytes per user. When you combine that with the growth in overall users of smartphones, the overall data usage on networks is quite impressive. And it's not expected to stop there. A recent survey expects that the average gigabyte per user will hit a hypergrowth mode with 5G, jumping up to 30, maybe even 40 by 2021. And probably up to 100 or so by 2025. That doesn't even factor in the home replacement market. That's just for smartphones and tablets and other devices like that. So with all this excitement, you must imagine that I'm going to tell you, rush out and buy the latest 5G smartphone in 2019. Nope, it's actually not a good idea. And here is why. First is coverage. 5G is not an easy deployment. It requires many more sites, often microsites, and that's a lot more than 4G had. And that's a couple problems there. One, it means that places like Manhattan and downtown Los Angeles, it makes a lot of sense. You're going to put these little microsites in all over the place. But not necessarily the case for the suburbs, because it might also require some back-end upgrades for fiber connections and things like that. This will make it difficult, even more so, for rural areas, who may not have coverage for many months, if not into 2020 and beyond. There's been talk of a lower band, which may help with some of the in-building, which would also be a concern. For those of you who aren't too technical, lower frequencies tend to get through materials like concrete and wood, and other ones a little better. It does often mean slower speeds, though, these lower frequencies. So depending on where you're living and where you're going, and how often you spend time in parking garages and things that use in-building systems, you're probably going to find yourself spending a lot of time in 4G coverage in 2019, even with a 5G phone. The second main area is battery life. If you look at most cars, they always advertise fuel economy with their lower power engine. So if there's a 4-cylinder and a 6-cylinder option, or a turbo option, if they quote fuel economy, it's not usually the larger engine they're going to quote. And they also make sure that it's under optimal conditions, so they're not hauling around, hockey equipment or stuff from Home Depot in the back. Usually when you upgrade to more power, as I mentioned, it comes at a cost to fuel economy. The same holds true for your battery. And I'm going to show you why in a little bit, but that's going to be an issue when it comes to the battery life for these devices. Batteries have not kept up. The networks have gotten faster, the screens have gotten better, devices are incredible now, but battery technology is not that much better than it was a few years ago. Because remember, connectivity is not the only thing that kills batteries. These bright screens, 500 nit or 800 nit, whatever the heck that means, do contribute significantly to the power consumption of a device. 5G modules mean better speed, but mean more power. According to Verizon CEO, this might not always be the case, though. He claims that as 5G progresses, batteries are going to last much, much longer. He even had the audacity to say they might last as long as 30 days. His belief, which I kind of understand, is that a lot of the actual computing being done on smartphones will be moved away from the phone onto the network as well as other things, and that's going to dramatically reduce the drain on the battery. So over time, it does look like 5G will be excellent for the battery, but not to start. This technology is not coming in 2019. I don't even know if it's 2020. So your battery life will not get better in 2019 over devices you have now. To fix this, some of the devices are going to be using bigger battery, but consumers have shown they don't want to walk around with a big, thick phone. They want thinner and thinner. So that puts the smartphone companies in a bit of a difficult situation. Do they go with the thicker battery to give you the same kind of battery life you have now, knowing that you might not want to hold the phone? Or do they actually try to stay streamlined and hope you don't mind dashing for a charger all the time? The third main area is the actual usage. And I've done this before, comparing driving a Ferrari through a school zone, using that as an analogy. Sure, a Ferrari has no problem going through a school zone. It doesn't really like it, but it can do it. But if you were only ever driving at the speed of a school zone, why on earth would you buy a Ferrari? Wouldn't you buy something a little more practical? And that's kind of what I think for most people when it comes to 5G, especially in 2019. 4G offers enough speed for video, for Skype, for most of the applications that people want to do when they're away from their home. In fact, many websites will not even allow you to access at 5G. And how much faster are you going to download CNN anyways, even if they could give you 5G speeds? The initial benefit for a lot of people might be the lower latency. But again, these applications have been designed to work in a mobile environment. So Skype is kind of used to dealing with, or FaceTime, is used to dealing with a bit of latency. I'm not quite sure it's going to be enough of a difference. And as I mentioned, you might not be in 5G coverage often anyways. So don't discourage from buying 5G phone ever, because I think by 2020, definitely 2021, all of these kinks will be worked out. The coverage will be much better, especially in the in-building side. You're going to see it make its way out to your cottage in different places. No issues there. The second is that by that point, companies will have had the chance to build apps like VR and AR and other ones that truly take advantage of 5G. I think you're going to see some extraordinary apps coming out, just not in 2019. It does seem like carriers are going to start in that time period to implement some of these battery optimization changes. So I wouldn't guarantee, 30 days out of a charge, but at least it will make up for the extra draw from the cell module from 5G. So you probably get pretty good battery life in that time frame. The next thing is other parts of the world will catch up. If you tend to roam a lot, not everywhere's going to have 5G. But by 2020 and 2021, more places will have it. Finally, I'll leave you with some advice coming from one of the biggest companies in the world. Probably for different reasons, Apple was putting off having a 5G module in their phones. The actual reason, from what I've heard, has something to do with the chip availability. But they're kind of saying publicly that they prefer to wait. They want to get all the kinks out of the technology. They kind of want it all to work. So even if they're not being totally truthful as to the reason why they're doing this, I personally think you should take Apple's cue. You also should wait. But based on what I've heard, most people won't. I think most people will go to a 5G phone next year. You just might be a little disappointed at the performance, at least for the first year anyways. Thanks again for listening. I'm Larry Bohumor. As always, check out our new webpage, the Internet of Things, madesimple.com. And I'd love for you to hit the little subscribe button on the podcast service that you're listening to. Thanks again for listening. Hope everyone has a good holidays. Take care.